Good morning. My name is Todd Latham. I'm the president of Actual Media and your host today for this fourth in our Blue Economy webinar series presented by Water Canada. It looks like Mother Nature, since it is Earth Week, has decided to give some of us a little blanket of snow this morning, especially in the Toronto area. Kind of unusual, but it is Earth Week, so Mother Nature is in charge. Before we get started, I just wanted to navigate a little bit of the platform this morning. As you'll notice, people are chatting on the right-hand column there. You can pose a question. On the bottom, it says Ask a Question. You click on that. You can write in your questions. Appreciate you doing that. We will also have polls down there at some point, so that's where you'll be able to fill in the poll questions, and we'll get to that. But before I introduce the session and our speakers, let's each take a moment to acknowledge the many First Nations and Indigenous peoples of Canada as the original water stewards of this great country. I'm in Toronto, which is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. So again, welcome to the fourth in our Blue Economy series. This is on innovation. We had our first in this series for the spring of 2021 on January 20th, and we defined the blue economy in that session, or we tried to expand the blue economy in that session by urging to go beyond the UN definition of what a blue economy is, beyond oceans and coastal areas, to include lakes, rivers, streams, and even urban water. The second in our series on February 17th, we talked about what it means to build the blue economy and the many sectors and opportunities where there are to drive employment and the business of water. Last month on March 17th, we talked about governance of water and the various policies and regulatory structures and jurisdictions that help us manage our water resources. All of these past sessions are available to watch on our Crowdcast channel. If you click on Actual Media logo up the top there and follow us, you'll be able to get access to those. Or you can go to the watercanada.net website and click on the Blue Economy series, and links to those videos are there. So what is the blue economy? A lot of people have been asking that question. Some people are saying, well, Todd, the blue economy is all about oceans. What are you guys talking about here in relation to water in Canada? Well, let's be clear. It's not about the commoditization of water. It is about how we define the business relationship to water. So it's about access, it's about treatment, it's about distribution, while respecting the rights, obligation, and interests of everybody who touches and shares it. So the blue economy is like our circular economy. It's the green economy. These are all interchangeable terms that define what we need to do to drive change, and hence the topic of today, innovation. So let's dive right in. I've got a bunch of questions, and we've got a really full agenda. This is going to be a lot of fun. We got some fantastic speakers. And first off, I'm going to introduce Stephen Liss. He's Ryerson University, heads up the innovation area for Ryerson. So obviously very apropos and quite familiar with distributed water systems. So welcome, Stephen Liss. Also, we have joining us today is Jeanette Jackson. Jeanette is with Foresight Cleantech Accelerator on the West Coast. And Jeanette has a lot of interest and background in clean tech adoption and technology advancement from her perspective. Our third speaker today is Kariann Aarup, and she is with AquaHacking. And I don't think we need too many introductions to AquaHacking. Very big brand that is driving youth and change and innovation through contests and inspired learning. Fourth speaker is Rahim Kanji with the Ontario Water Consortium, and working obviously in the Ontario area, driving some of the innovations for municipalities. And instead of me reading their bios, I'm going to let each one of them now take a couple of minutes and introduce themselves and a little bit of context from what we're going to be talking about today around the innovation of our blue economy. So we'll start with you, Stephen. A quick minute or two to introduce yourself and frame the discussion from your point of view. Thanks.
Great. So thank you very much, Todd, and it's a pleasure to be here with my fellow panelists and with all of you this morning on a really important topic. I'm an academic, a researcher and administrator in the university system for well over 30 years now. I'm a microbiologist by training, but specific to water, I'm an experimental researcher who's been very focused on biological processes in wastewater and water treatment and understanding the contributions that microbial processes play both positively and negatively in the quality of our water resources and how biological processes can be harnessed more efficiently and effectively to manage our water resources. Having said that, my work has been very fundamental at one level, but it was also focused on the fate of contaminants and emerging contaminants, including antibiotic resistance, to new technologies for treatment and disruptions in wastewater and water treatment. And more recently, a very strong interest in distributed systems, which I'd like to we'll have an opportunity to speak more about, particularly with respect to opportunities around one water solutions and the way water is managed across our country and the divide between urban, remote, northern, isolated, and many of the challenges with respect to the infrastructure across the whole range of communities in Canada, and the power of data and more systems orientation to managing our water resources and for real value and improving not only the lives of our peoples, but also for strategies for managing and improving the conditions on our own planet.
Yeah, we're going to go to Jeanette next. Thank you.
Oh, hi. Jeanette Jackson, CEO of Foresight. Nice to meet everyone this morning. A little bit about Foresight. Our mandate is to position Canada as a global leader in clean tech innovation. And we do that through a series of programs and initiatives that really support the innovation ecosystem, but also engage the other key stakeholders, industry, academia, government, and investors. Over the last year, we've also launched Water Next. It is really Canada's largest innovation network. Of course, we collaborated with AquaHacking and IISD to map out the 430 plus ventures that are working on water innovation. And for us, water is pretty broadly defined. Traditionally, a blue economy has referred to oceans and plastics and obviously the devastation that we're seeing there. But we do take a bit of a broader holistic approach to include freshwater, utilities, and other kind of everything related to water globally, if you will. Why is innovation important? Well, the reality is 50% of the innovation required to reach climate targets has not yet been developed, and 75% of the existing solutions are often not cost effective enough for mass adoption. And so from a water perspective, obviously in climate and clean tech, people often refer to GHG reductions, but without fresh water, we all understand how devastating that can be to so many sectors: agriculture, mining, mining, oil and gas, all the resource sectors, et cetera, et cetera. So we're hyper passionate about everything innovation, and water is one of the key pillars of our activity. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeanette. And over to you now, Kariann.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Todd, and good morning, everybody. Glad to be joining you from the land of the Lekwungen people, known as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations here in Victoria, BC. And thanks for the intro on AquaHacking, but maybe not everybody knows about AquaHacking. So I will just share a little bit about the program. And I'll be really happy to share sort of what we learned in the last 6 years of our program. So it's a tech challenge. It's an AquaHacking tech challenge focused on fresh water. And here we are today talking about tech innovation in water, but when we started this program 6 years ago, it was a very novel idea, a little eccentric, perhaps even received with some skepticism. The way we work our program is really about working with NGOs who are trying to solve water issues, and we invited them to come and bring their issues to a tech challenge, right? And that was very novel at the time. We engage university students, tech talent, but not just tech, all skill sets needed to really focus in a collaborative and creative way to come up with solutions, disruptive solutions, disrupting the way we do things. And I think that's really what innovation is about, and what inspired us was we want to do things differently. We want to get a next generation of young Canadians involved, knowing that we can do something, that are committed to climate change and sustainability. And let's do it with sort of all the skill sets that we have and that they have. From our program now, 28 youth-led water tech enterprises are up and running from coast to coast. We have run the challenge from coast to coast, from BC to Lake Winnipeg, through the Great Lakes, St. Lawrence Basin, to Atlantic Canada. We currently have 2 challenges under the way right now in Western Canada and in Quebec. And we're working on our lineup for fall 2021, 2022. So we've learned a lot, and I'm really looking forward to share all that we've seen and all the things that we're thinking about in terms of how this space is developing.
Thanks, Kariann. Rahim.
Hello, good morning, everyone. And Todd, thanks for hosting this discussion. My name is Rahim Kanji. I've been in the water sector now for 15 plus years. Started off commissioning wastewater and water treatment plants. So have had quite a journey to getting to Ontario Water Consortium, where I landed about 5 years ago, coming from that industry perspective and the tech perspective. And for those of you who may not actually know Ontario Water Consortium, or OWC, we're essentially the platform through which technology developers, academia, end users, and governments all intersect in Ontario to overcome water technology commercialization, technology development, and adoption challenges. Through our efforts over the last 10 years or so, since Ontario Water Consortium was first started, we've created an active consortium of companies and post-secondary institutions to tackle and advance these water technology commercialization challenges. We funded and created unique technology development capacity across those post-secondary institutions, including capacity with the creation of new lab facilities, but also 2 dedicated wastewater pilot facilities. We funded and facilitated more than 60 different technology development projects with at least as many companies, majority of those involving academic industry collaborations. Also catalyzed full-scale projects which adopt new technologies, including the ongoing project in Stratford, Ontario, which will be Canada's first net positive energy wastewater treatment plant. And outside of actual projects and getting new technology on the ground, we create lots of opportunities for stakeholder collisions, for development of HQPs at universities, multi-stakeholder collaborations between universities and industry and other stakeholders, as well as opportunities to showcase some of these new technologies. I also work closely with the charity Water for People Canada, and I'm happy to speak to anyone about how you or even your organizations could get involved to support clean water, sanitation, and hygiene education projects in the developing world too.
Thanks, Rahim. Thank you all for those introductions. I think probably the first question that I want to ask, because definitions are important to me as we started off with defining the blue economy. I want to get into how each of you defines innovation, because it's a word that's been thrown around a lot. Like the word sustainability, you kind of know what it means, but you're not really sure. It's sometimes taken out of context. So just everybody, if each of you could give us your definition of innovation and one example of something that is innovative, so we can kind of then move on to where those innovations occur in the water sector. So who wants to go first with your definition of innovation?
I can take a crack at it if you want. Okay. just in case there weren't any other volunteers, but yeah, I mean, as you said, Todd, I think this is a question that comes up pretty often, and definitions vary, and you know, and maybe it comes up often, or we're unable to define it because it depends on context. But I think fundamentally, we all know that there are a lot of different water challenges: quality, quantity, accessibility, reliability, affordability, and so on. And fundamentally, we also want to tackle these challenges, and we want to do that by applying novel tools and novel approaches. And I think that that's not just limited to technology, but also, you know, approaches to new revenue models or new partner or project delivery models, or progressive policy or regulatory sandboxes. And associated with that, I mean, the result of that, or even the driver of that, is we're doing this to tackle those problems, but also to achieve, some sort of economic advantage, cost savings perhaps, or environmental advantage, better effluent quality, or perhaps maximizing some other scarce resources, right? Where we're improving efficiencies or tackling other challenges, creating energy, or saving space for creating new for land. So,
yeah. Anybody else want to tackle like your best definition? Yeah, go ahead.
I'll make it quick. I mean, we keep it pretty simple. It's really an improvement in a process, product, or service that achieves some sort of improvement in performance. And for us, performance is, like you mentioned, it has to do with sustainability for Foresight and all of our ventures, but also all of the other socioeconomic opportunities. So if you look at the SDG goals, there's a lot of innovation that will be required for us to check all the boxes in terms of a holistic, comprehensive, inclusive, diverse approach to tackling climate change, and of course a lot of broader issues. Rahim, love your comment around business models as well. A lot of people think that it's just a technology, but business models and the transformation of how we do things is equally important.
Good observation. Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, so I hold a title called Vice President of Research and Innovation at Ryerson University. You think I'd have some really great, profound definition for what innovation represents based on that title. And as Todd, you've indicated, and in fact, Jeanette, when you're in terms of the definition, it is ubiquitous and it has a very business connotation with respect to processes. But a lot of innovation, and frankly, from my perspective, isn't as bold, as aspirational as it needs to be. Innovation is a very powerful word, and I think we need to really reset that, particularly when we think about the intractable and those significant challenges with regards to our water resources. When I think about innovation, I think about harvesting new ideas, novel combination of ideas, new insights that make new opportunities, but more importantly, achieve breakthroughs in addressing those intractable challenges and problems. And so when I see that value, of course, it's really about people. And so how do you engage people? And how do you get people across diverse interests and perspectives, be it an interdisciplinary approach or be it into the communities and where our water resources and water services are delivered and are contributing to, be it in the resource sectors, be it in the industries that are where water is so important to the communities for a source of healthy, safe, and clean water. But also, I think there's an obligation. I mean, water is a vital resource for that really bathes the planet, right? I mean, it really does, and in so many different ways. And there's service that water provides with respect to sustaining our natural resources, and that includes whether it's recreation or fisheries or freshwater and marine, to the various industries around that. So I think about not only the sustaining, but the protection and the innovations, and it requires, I think, a different approach. And so, and innovation should extend not just to the technical elements of this, but to the way we actually undertake the processes that lead to new solutions, and includes policy through the way we communicate, way we interact, and the way even our governments work. We have a very unique feature in Canada with respect to geography, the spread, and geographically, the distributions of people, and really a significant divide between large and urban and small, rural, northern, isolated, remote, and then within respect to particular peoples, indigenous peoples as well. Very different in many ways compared to the rest of the world. So we really have to look at this from Canadian context as well as to what innovation really is going to achieve with respect to advancing, whether it's the blue economy in the broadest context, or specific problems associated with water, and how it best is able to be managed and in terms of supporting our country.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah. So, Kariann, final word on innovation.
Yeah, I think we've covered it well, but maybe let me just illustrate with an example of one of our NGO partners in one of our earlier AquaHacking challenges, who said, I didn't really know what was going to come of this, but when I presented all the information to all these students who come from a completely different background, they turned the problem on its head. I've never seen it this way before. And it's sort of like it's the catalyst or the spark for innovation to happen, right? Because you sort of just completely change things in a way that you didn't know was possible, right? So I think part of it is knowing what you don't know, right? And it takes you have to be bold to say, here's this problem, how do you see it? And be driven, have that shared desire to come up with a solution. So
that's good. I think that's kind of echoes what Rahim was saying earlier about collisions, right? About you need to have these collisions in order for great things to happen. You need to have these sandboxes. I think that's another term that's come up. Have these sandboxes to play in to build models that you didn't know existed before and share those ideas with other people. I'm just going to read a quote from Madeleine Paquin. She's the CEO of Logistech. She says, "In today's context, innovation and transformation are the work of every individual every day, not something that happens once in a lifetime." And I think that's really kind of what we want to get at today with innovation is it's not something that happens in a lab in a eureka moment. It's not somebody from 3M saying, I just invented the sticky note. While those things are innovations, I think what we need to do is start looking at innovation as a daily occurrence, start to change our processes, as some people have mentioned in the comments. So in that vein, let's go to a question that has just come up in the question and answer. And this is a great opportunity for each of you to talk about specific case studies or examples. Have you seen any interesting business models for the water tech industry as it relates to innovation? So I think, she mentioned Ostara. Obviously, they have some innovations around nutrient remediation and upcycling. So each of you, is there one sort of innovative water technology or not necessarily just a technology, but a policy or something innovative in the water sector that stands out for you? Let's just go with one and let's make it quick and we'll go into some other questions. So I'll start with you, Jeanette, because I know you've got like 1,000 of them.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, for us, the biggest shift we've seen is the business model from selling the technology system outright to, providing a service with the technology. So let's say water technology as a service or Cleantech as a service to simplify. And what that does is it reduces the capital cost requirements for your adopters to adopt the technologies. And we've seen several ventures that have taken this approach, and a lot of their customer base is rapidly increasing and rapidly adopting those technologies in everything from pharmaceuticals to the resource sector to utilities and municipalities.
Okay, any other examples?
So I totally agree with Jeanette. I mean, there's the water as a service also connects to the pay for performance, but it's also finding new revenue streams as well. So like I mentioned, the Stratford project that's happening here in Ontario. This is a project that's maximizing the use of existing assets. It's has co-benefits of waste diversion. The town's created a green bin program. There's energy production through co-digestion. But the new revenue stream is through the RNG market in BC. So that's an interesting, different model as well to look at being able to adopt innovation and creating a new revenue stream as well as all those other co-benefits.
So municipalities thinking like businesses as an innovation in its own right.
Fair enough.
Stephen or Kariann?
Well, I'm just going to actually maybe frame it as a question related to the last comment, because I guess my observation would be that our smaller municipalities and communities are in a better position, I think, to be more innovative. I think there is certainly the pressures of cost and tax-based revenue that bears on that as well. But also, I think the sense of being closely in touch with their community, and that there's a very strong community orientation of with respect to participation and implementation. And so I'm just I guess my observation would be and I'm curious as to the other panelists and those who are on watching this is that I think some of those innovations that we're drawing on as examples are largely in our smaller communities. And I'm just wondering whether that's just an illustration of the connection to community that's important in driving innovation.
maybe it's a risk-adverse situation. Maybe there's a little more opportunity to be a champion in a smaller municipality than there is perhaps in a larger organizational setting. But over to you, Kariann or Jeanette or Rahim.
Maybe just, from our example, we're obviously dealing with very early stage startups, and where we've seen success, I would say in the smaller municipalities, it's been easier. However, there is of course always an exception to those kinds of statements. And the city of Montreal, where we started and where our head office is, there was an individual there who just was really interested. And so there was one individual who sort of believed in it and made it happen. And so, one of our earlier, a startup who emerged from one of the earlier challenges, Can Forecast, worked very closely with one individual to refine their solution and develop it, and now have scaled and are working with upwards of 15 municipalities across the country. So, I think as a blanket statement, you could say it's perhaps easier for smaller municipalities to be more agile and maybe sort of more connected that way in uptake and implementation of technology. But, the power of an individual who believes in this can make all the difference, irrespective of the size of a municipality.
Yeah, we need champions for sure. That they drive the innovation.
Mm-hmm. In Metro Vancouver has a pretty bold water group as well, and they obviously have a test facility. Same thing with Calgary with the Aqua facility. So I do think it's getting a little more normalized for municipalities to have flexibility on an innovation and adopting technologies. So
and it might be easier for small or more agile. I think that's a good way to put it. But at the end of the day, I think if there's a fundamental pain that's being felt by a municipality, whether it's large or small, they will find a solution, and it could be a technology solution that has benefits or maybe multiple benefits. I think that drives the project. I think it's irrespective of the size of the municipality. Maybe it's easier for a small one to deal with their council, for example. But if there's a fundamental pain and a problem, then if it's costing money, and other drivers, then the solution needs to be found.
So maybe on that, I got to pose a question back is, who are the champions? I mean, apart from the four of you, who are the champions in Canada who are driving innovation? And I'm thinking more, not necessarily tech companies, but governments. So we need leaders to say water is important, innovation in water is important. Who stands out as our leaders, federal, provincial, municipal, as a true water champion? Put you on the spot to name one person.
Well, I look to Calgary when you use that as an example, or look to Alberta in particular, and whether it was a crisis around flooding or the heavy demand of water in the oil patch, at least historically, or other issues. But I remember Kim Sturgis's leadership, and really it was outside of government, really, but somebody who really took a strong hand in terms of Alberta's stewardship in the earliest days, and whether it was direct or indirect, by seeing the leadership around Aqua at the University of Calgary, Jackson and others and so forth, and then seeing some of the implementation of innovative technologies appearing in Canada for the first time that have been adopted around the world, and so. I think it's really leadership and somebody who's stepping up and really doing that. And that's I think for me, at least looking back a few years historically, is where that sort of stands out in my mind as an illustration of that leadership.
I'm delighted to hear you say Kim's name, because we've come together, and that's how the Water Next initiative for Foresight and AquaHacking has all kicked off. So that's fantastic. A couple other quick notes on champions. Obviously, the Canada Water Agency is coming to light, figuring out its strategy. Innovation is identified as a pillar of activity there. And of course, there's pretty aggressive conversations happening to support Indigenous communities and the lack of fresh water. And so how will that have a ripple effect on innovation? And I think at the federal level, there's quite a few strong champions there as well, whether it's through Environment Climate Change Canada or other respective ministries.
Good.
Yeah, I'd like to add too, just, with our program, we partner with leading sort of water NGOs, OBWB in the Okanagan, IISD, Atlantic Water Network, right, who are really well regarded in the water space, and we say we want to engage through a tech innovation challenge to reach out to more stakeholders, to reach out to partners with whom we've never yet worked. And I think that's they're champions, right? They're champions bridging across sectors, and taking on sort of a model that is completely different, and wanting to sort of disrupt how they themselves work to achieve their own goals around fresh water. And I think that that's an important piece of this puzzle.
And I think we need champions across all of the different stakeholder groups. We need the champions within the municipalities to drive projects forward. City of London has been really great on the wastewater side. They have many different tech pilots and demonstration projects across several of their wastewater treatment plants. We need academic champions to help drive investment in R&D infrastructure and capacity. That's what helped OWC build all that infrastructure in the past and the testing facilities. You need government champions to fast track approvals. I mean, I think I saw some Aqua people in the chat box here in the participant list, but they know about how helpful that was to have government champions to help with approvals for the Stratford project. And then, of course, we need sector level champions as well to drive the conversation at a higher, more strategic innovation ecosystem level. So yeah, across all those stakeholder groups, we need champions.
Maybe what we'll do as part of our Waters Next Awards at the Canadian Water Summit is maybe identify some of the champions that we've seen over the years in those awards programs, and maybe create a list of the most innovative water champions in Canada, and we'll put Kim on there. I think Autumn Pelletier in the First Nations side of things has been a great champion, as well as others in the municipal side, like our own Robert Holler, who's been mentioned in the chat here too. So I think a list of champions that we can all look up to would be maybe a good idea for our Water Canada team to pull together. I'm going to shift to another question that's come in from Kristen Tully. She's used to be with the Lake Ontario Waterkeepers, Swim Drink Fish, and she's asked, people and companies are often hesitant to adopt new water tech because they don't understand the need or the urgency. What do you think the water tech sector could benefit from nonprofit and researchers who do work to help build awareness and demand for tech solutions? So how do you drive the need, I guess, because some people are hesitant to take that risk?
I'll jump in with a quick comment. Whether we like it or not, policy often plays a bigger role than, at least from my perspective, than I'd like. I think, altruistically, it'd be nice if everyone did understand the critical, stage that we're at in terms of climate and the role that water plays in addressing those challenges. It's only going to get worse unless we take some pretty critical action. Although I think the last year has had people convene and reflect like never before. So at the board level, whether it's ESG, again, the SDGs, and that's all going to have a ripple effect. But policy continues, in my opinion, to play a critical role in the adoption of technology.
Anybody else want to dive in and what we can do to drive people to take some risks?
I think, it's interesting. A couple of the solutions or the startups, I guess, that have emerged from our program were developed in response to an issue defined by an NGO. So one was road salt. So WWF had their campaign, right, about reducing road salt. And the team that's working, or the startup now that's working on that, has connected that. So the NGO is the problem definer. The implementer is not the NGO, but is the municipality, is public works, our enterprises, contracting to public works to dispense salt in the winter. But how do we, so it's about connecting the dots, right? It's sort of like a supply chain from problem to solution, touches across many, many, many sectors. We have the same too with invasive species, right? So invasive species, big issue. a solution came up for cleaning the ballasts of pleasure crafts as they emerge from lakes. So, again, it's not the NGO that's concerned with invasive species, but it's municipalities and parks and various departments in municipalities who need to make sure it's like, hey, we should have this at our public access sites to lakes, right? So, and again, I think, to Kristen's question is that it's connecting the dots across sectors, understanding that water is a continuum, right? And you cannot manage it in sectors, in sections. It has to be, it's very complex that way. And I think that's part of the hurdle. It's one of the hurdles that we have to overcome in terms of how solutions are implemented.
Yeah, and I like the thought about connecting the dots, and it's that active facilitation that it requires a lot of effort and a lot of time and energy in order to bring solutions and problems together along with the other stakeholders. And then to Jeanette's point, having an urgent driver as well, whether that's a policy or a regulatory driver or another type of driver. I mean, we have to have those drivers, or perhaps a big vision as well. So that's all important.
So the intersections, though, of where we see those dots connected, really has to reach beyond our borders as well. Well, I mean, so we've spoken of the very unique position that Canada is in, and it's framing that in the context of where we are and how we have to look at our own country, but we have to be thinking that water is very much a globally connected resource, right? And metaphorically and physically, if we can frame it that way, but also in the context of being really competitive in terms of our stewardship and leadership. And so I look at countries like the Netherlands, whether it's in the green in the circular economy or just in their historical leadership on water, going to obviously a real issue of water stewardship over its country's history, so I really think that we have to take that view, and if to be that way, that allows us to have stretch goals and to think beyond whether it's the regulatory framework or the policy, but really thinking of us being really truly leaders globally, right? To me, that's I think important part of the intersections that we need to be mindful of if we really wanted to move the yardstick.
Thank you. Yeah, I know Ryerson Urban Water is doing some good work in terms of innovation with some of your students, some of the bench scale projects, trying to reinvent flushable wipes being one of them. So that leads into a question that we have here. And I think it's a good one, and we all can have some answers to. What are the top 3 water problems that have a current unmet need that would be ripe for future innovation opportunities? And I'll start with one. Obviously, is our boil water advisories and lack of clean water on First Nations. Why that has not been an extreme focus of innovative power to address that solution, I don't know. I think we're getting there, but that would be one of the top water problems in the country that we need to drive innovation. I welcome other thoughts on the problems that are searching for an innovative solution.
I think there's lots of trends that cause the problems. I totally agree with having the First Nations water crisis in Canada as one of the top 3. Water and sanitation for everyone is of critical importance, but also for municipalities. I think we're talking a little bit of municipalities too, is say changing workforce demographics. I mean, there's a lot of people retiring, and how are we replacing those operators? Or aging infrastructure is another option, another opportunity. Climate change as well. On the industrial side, there's emerging contaminants, water reuse. So I think there's lots of space for new innovation and new opportunities.
Kariann or Stephen, you got any specific problems you think need to be addressed?
Go ahead, Stephen.
Well, I think some of the major ones are highlighted. I think that there's some intractable issues and muddiness with respect to emerging contaminants, or even debates around trihalomethanes and disinfection byproducts, and to the extent that we really understand what clean and safe and healthy water really is. I think there's a growing gap around surveillance. And I indicate right now with the COVID, in fact, there's a wide variety of efforts, including a consortium of university labs across Ontario, including Ryerson, involving virus surveillance in wastewaters and through the wastewater sewer shed and right into the treatment systems from facilities and so forth. And so you think about the power of surveillance and the opportunities, and really catching up with the rest of the world, whether it's in antibiotic resistance or other emerging issues and so forth, and or disease, as we're seeing right now in public health. But I think that's there are numerous areas. But I saw even in the chat reference to data, and I really think the power of data, that's a huge one. There's a ton of data out there. Are we really? We're leaving it lying at the side of the road and not harnessing it. And there's a real opportunity to think about harnessing it, whether it's just on informatics and the power of AI and the way we can connect communities and support communities across the distributed system through data. I think is really a huge opportunity, and it would be a wasted opportunity at this time in really the pivoting of around a digital economy to think about the power of data. And so if you look at the energy sector, companies like Schneider have really transformed to be digital companies, not just power. I think it's the same for water. I think we need to be more digitally minded, and I think that's a real powerful opportunity for innovation in Canada in particular.
All I'll add is that bring the issues to the next challenge.
Yes, good.
Whatever they may be. There's an avenue there for some solution development opportunities.
Good. Well,
I was just
go ahead, Rahim.
I was just going to say, I mean, with respect to data, broad asset management planning, really good data-driven asset management planning is not only needed for the operational side, but I mean, it's needed to understand the infrastructure and really get the most out of existing infrastructure. And once we understand that, then you can find strategic ways to invest in things like innovative technology or ways to optimize your existing capacity or your infrastructure, and then also to facilitate or encourage other types of new investments too.
Yeah. In order for asset management to be successful at the municipal level, you need elected officials to support and champion asset management policies. So I think that's another innovation that's required, is perhaps elected officials need to be a little more upfront and aware of what the issues are in their municipality and listen to the advice of bureaucrats. Jeanette, you had something you wanted to offer on this side?
Just a quick comment. I mean, over the last several years, we also work with industry on innovation challenges, and we did a waste hot water challenge with COSIA. We know that CRIN, if you're not following the Clean Resource Innovation Network, they have a whole water stream of activity happening too. I think some untapped areas are pharmaceuticals, food and beverage, clothing and fabrics. I mean, the amount of water required to make a pair of jeans. I think we talk about the resource sector and everything because it feels like low-hanging fruit, but those sectors are moving to try to address some of these challenges. And I think there's a whole funnel of opportunity coming for new challenges and opportunities in sectors that haven't been top of mind to date. So that's all I wanted to leave it with.
No, that's good. You raised the issue of water footprint. So maybe the top three problems, just look at the products or services that have the biggest water footprint, and that's maybe where we should focus some of our innovative efforts. I'm going to shift over to the budget that was announced earlier this week. A lot of people are saying there's some really good pieces in it. Of course, one has already been mentioned, is the Canada Water Agency, $17.4 million over 2 years. Curious if any of you think the Canada Water Agency is going to be a driver for innovation, or what do you think that role is, given that water is a provincial jurisdiction and you now have this federal body? How is that going to help or hinder our water innovation program? Anybody want to jump in?
I think I think it was, Stephen sort of who mentioned it, this sort of multi-jurisdictional approach that needs to be taken to water. So, coming together and having an agency who can convene and help coordinate and connect the dots, sort of it's an image I like, right? I think that can be helpful. Absolutely. And with water data, right? We have to also think about water data in that coordinated pan-Canadian perspective, right? This is not just, it can't be segmented. Watershed governance is one thing, but then we need to go above and sort of, share the lessons between watersheds. Again, that interconnectivity of water, I think, really positions it well for a Canada Water Agency type organization. Details to be figured out, but I'm hopeful. We're very optimistic, and we want to work obviously very closely as it develops and gets established.
Any other comments
the data piece is critical. We're looking at standardizing data and streamlining and giving more sectors and regions the tools they need to collect the data, so that we have a starting point, so that innovators and policymakers know where to start. That is something that we've fed actually ourselves into. I think, Kariann, we took some of your notes and feedback in our feedback to CWA several months ago. So data. Yeah.
I think to be successful, I think about the CWA's mandate and what we see as the investment, small or as large as that might be. I think it's about accountability, right? You got to stop thinking of or thinking of a benevolent relationship to CWA to solve the problem. I think it's an agency, but it's got to be held accountable, and there's got to be dialogue, right? And so I mean, on one hand, I can only hope that it will achieve what it's intended to achieve, and maybe beyond that. But at the same time, as Canadians, we need to, and those who are engaged in the water sector and leadership across the country in this is to really to be there and fully engaged, and hopefully the agency is going to create the vehicle for that dialogue too to occur. But and so to me, I only hope, right? And I think we have to take some responsibility to make sure it works, right? And just not let it just sit there and undertake its work without the community being engaged.
Yeah, totally agree with what everybody said. What Stephen was saying about solving the problem, I think that really falls to a lot more local expertise and innovation champions to bring solutions to problems and have that deep knowledge locally of what's happening. For the Canada Water Agency, I mean, they have innovation and infrastructure as one of their pillars. So, let's see where that goes. I think there's still lots of conversations and happening around what the mandate will be. But one thing for Canada Water Agency is to a role that they have is to provide some cohesiveness across national policy, but also what we could see from them, I think would be really helpful, is just having a big, bold national vision and that, or a goal, right, or a target. And that could be just an example. Maybe it's a target around achieving or moving towards net zero energy wastewater treatment plant until 2050, right? So having a big, bold a vision and a target for Canada, if it comes from this type of an agency, I mean, that could drive so much innovation and opportunity.
That's a really good point, Rahim, about having that bold sort of moonshot vision for water. Who do you think the best champion for that would be? Would that be somebody like Catherine McKenna or John Wilkinson or the head of the new water agency? Like, who should be the one to be that Kennedy person to say we will get to the moon as it relates to water? We've got a dog being nominated.
I'm sorry. She's needy this morning. Sorry. Hi, this is Zoe. All right, down we go. No.
So I like that idea. Net zero wastewater treatment plant by what? When did you say, Rahim? When can we make that happen?
Well, I think 2050 aligns with some of the climate change targets for the federal government.
2050. It's going to take us that long to get to a net zero wastewater treatment plant?
if Canada
Thoughts?
Water Agency wants to make it a more ambitious target, then all the more power to them.
Well, they only have $17.4 million over 2 years, so I don't think that's going to cut it. It's going to need more of that green stimulus billions that McKenna and Wilkinson are sitting on.
Sure.
Any thoughts
that's
on?
what having a bold vision can help achieve, right? If there is a bold vision, then it can help achieve the more funding to reach that.
So,
And I think it's a collaboration across ministries. I mean, often, if, innovative ideas often don't fit in a box, surprise, surprise. And if you don't fit in a box, you say, well, it doesn't fit in our box, go and check in that box. It doesn't fit our box, go check that box. And, so I think we need to create sort of the space between the boxes, I think, is where investment needs to happen and where we need to focus for these new ideas. And so it's not just one ministry. It's not just one minister. I think we need to get them all together. We all care about water. How do we all bring what we need to do sort of, in our mandates for our constituents for water, right? So it's a way of, water in a way is the vehicle for a collaborative, somebody said today, the innovation has to happen every day, all the time. Yeah. So how do you bring that spirit to how we work across government? It's the connecting the dots, the space between the boxes. That's where water flows, right?
Good pun. There are a lot of water puns. Don't get me started. This is good. Maybe what we'll do now at this point is go into our polls, because it's always very revealing. So everybody on the call, if you could go into the polls, click on the bottom right there, answer them. I'll give everybody a quick few seconds to go in and answer those before I start to do the reveal. We can talk a little bit about them. I'm going to answer them too. Interesting. Okay, so the top two, the other ones are more related to housekeeping things, but let's stop at the top one. The top factor that drives adoption of innovative water technologies. And I think, Jeanette, you mentioned it, policies, legislation, and regulations are really the driver for these things. And that's coming across with almost 45% of people. Interestingly, number two is technological capabilities improvements. So that's something we talked about today as well, but those could also be barriers, right? Because people are looking at like, oh, that's too difficult to implement. We haven't done it that way before. So I'm curious at what you four think of this top poll question. Does it make sense to you? Are we people answering in the right way according to how you see the world?
Again, I think fundamentally the driver that promotes the adoption of innovation is solving a pain point that an organization, an individual, a municipality is feeling, and whether that pain comes from more strict regulation or it comes from not having enough land to expand their facilities if they're in a growing community. I mean, it's all about solving the pain point. I don't think the reason for adopting innovation has really changed much. I mean, every person adopts innovation because of solving a fundamental pain, and a lot of it has to do with scarcity as well.
Yeah, one thing I'm looking at now, obviously, cost savings and customer demand are lower. And you would think in a perfect world that those would be the top drivers of innovative water technologies. Any thoughts, Jeanette or Kariann or Stephen? You're on, yeah.
I think, again, we deal with early stage water innovation solutions. And I think there's a testing period that has to happen that we're really focusing on. Particularly with municipalities, right? How can we make it? How can we partner with a municipality who has a pain point? Here's a potential solution. So how do we create the confidence and refine a solution through testing? Sort of, win-win solution. And then I think once you've proven it, then the customer demand picks up. It's like, oh, it is possible. Oh, it is cost effective. It is efficient. It does help us. It does solve the pain point. So, it's many things, at once. And I think, the next poll was about, risk aversion. And I think that's part of that issue, right? Is, to build the confidence, to know it's going to work, to understand how it's going to work. So I would say that's how we would come to it in terms of the testing piece and doing that in a collaborative way.
Stephen?
Yeah, so I sort of see the regulatory and the policy piece both as as a significant driver, because it just gets to the pain points, particularly where there's a reaction, and so the question I guess I have is thinking being more proactive around this. And so where I see some of this play out is particularly in the role around the private sector or in areas outside of what I would say the regulatory framework with respect to new industries, new processes, or desire to be more efficient and more economical by virtue of the business needs and demands of a particular sector and resource. And I see this in relationship to some of the companies I work with, some of the smaller startups and sort of in these niche areas. And so there's tremendous amount of capability across our country, and I'm just amazed by the breadth and depth of whether it's the universities and the post-secondary system across all areas of research and advanced training and the talent that's out there. But to me, it's just elevating what I see as some of the smallest and the most incremental things and scaling and accelerating those to be much more impactful and broader in terms of what it offers. And so, I am concerned about the regulatory framework and the way in which the regulatory can be relaxed and better represented, more level playing field across the country, and at the same time towards positioning Canada competitively. And again, going back to the idea of being more globally oriented, is that many of our technologies, whether membrane technology or UV disinfection, historically, where Canada has been a very significant leader, but we've been very slow adapters to technologies in our own country, right? And yes, we are a smaller market, relatively speaking, but we're not the early adapters necessarily. And so I look at countries like Singapore, for example, with water reuse and water recycling, right? So crisis, but they just drive it, right? It's a nation state, of course, so you don't have the same jurisdictional issues necessarily, or even countries like Israel have had to manage very small freshwater resources very effectively, or to derive through desalination water need to meet their water needs, but or other parts of the Middle East, or even looking at Africa as well. But it just strikes me that we just have to think about things a bit differently than we have been doing.
Yeah,
and with Israel and Singapore, I mean, again, there's scarcity of water, and there's a big vision from the government saying that they want to become water independent and so on. So I think it's all connected.
That's the driver. That's very good points, everybody. I think when there's a real pressing need, when there's a crisis, that's when we come up with our best ideas. And Canada, as you saw in the poll, very risk adverse, very apologetic, and probably also very spoiled with its water resources. So that pressing need is perhaps not as great as it would be in other countries. So,
but Todd, you've talked about a crisis. I mean, we have a crisis in Canada. It's whether it's the boil water advisories in Newfoundland to the Indigenous communities and peoples, our northern communities, or the decaying infrastructure and the inequity around water. I mean, yes, we have riches of water resources, but why would we think that they're not scarce in the context of the quality of that water and our stewardship around that water? We have a crisis, and we
do, and it's just not maybe identified in the same way as perhaps Singapore or Israel, but yet it is a Canadian context crisis, and why we can't devote that $8 billion that I know the government was assigned to Indigenous infrastructure projects. I don't know why that hasn't driven some of those innovative remote and rural technology adoption there. And that's something we'll certainly get into in Water Canada and our Water Summit coming up. I know Jeanette has been in and out. She's, changed microphones or headphones. Jeanette, if you're there, I'm going to give you a quick second to say hello, and then we're going to wrap up.
Awesome. The two quick comments I was going to make is we still do have several ventures that are technologies looking for problems. So on the technology capability side, we need to get more problem-driven innovation coordinated. And I do think we've left out governance. I have the privilege of doing the competence board training program right now, and the role that governance and directors within large corporates and plays and in the whole system really could have a significant impact on driving innovation across all sectors, but water in particular.
Well, thanks. I know I was going to give each of you a crystal ball moment at the end to say, what's water going to look like in 2030, but I think we've kind of covered off that it should be more inclusive. It will be well managed, better managed. It will be part of a blue economy, green economy, circular economy, all the above. We'll be taking better care of it because we'll have to, and we'll hopefully be addressing some of these crises locally and globally. So thank you all for joining us today. Everybody go out there and innovate. It's our global responsibility as individuals to constantly change and improve our lives. So let's do that on water. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you at the Canadian Water Summit coming up on June 8th to 10th. Go to watersummit.ca or go to watercanada.ca for more information. This video recording will be live shortly after we leave today, so you can watch it again. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, you can watch all the previous episodes on our website. And that's a wrap. Thank you very much for the fourth and our final series for the spring. We're going to have the Water Summit, as I mentioned, June 8th to 10th. And then we're going to start with this series again in the fall. Brand new series, brand new topics. Looking forward to seeing you then. Thanks very much. Have a great day.